My name is Donna. I'm with D365, the NAV people. Today we're going to review some purchase orders, talk a little bit about how to create them, how to do a receipt of goods, and also how to do the purchase invoice. With NAV being a segregated duty type functionality, each of these different processes could be with different people doing those. As we review this, just keep in mind that permission sets are in place, that can be in place to allow certain people to do those segregated duties. I'm going to talk a little bit about some navigation as we go through this. I've created a shortcut over here to the left. This is just a way that I have my shortcuts that I can add. Also, to be able to add those, make those changes. As you see, I went right into the purchase order list, but all I have to do is right click in this area or at the home screen and do customize navigation panel, and it pops up this panel here. If you notice, I have my role center over to the right. I have master data in a grouping, and then I have purchase order. To be able to add a new one, all I'm going to do is do add. I'm going to go to the purchase order area, order processing, and now I actually can do quotes and add quotes to my list: blanket orders, returns, purchase invoices, purchase credit memos. I'm just going to add the purchase invoice here. I'm going to say okay. Again, I can move that up by just selecting the button on the right. I'm going to actually move it. I just want to move it up. I can move it to a certain area on this screen. That way it's actually on its individual grouping over here to the far left. But I'm just going to put it up underneath purchase orders, and I'm going to say okay. As we walk through these different transactions and the types of entries, we are going to actually go into, and as I said, we can do shortcuts. We can actually go in right under finance. We have these department tiles. Your tiles here are based on your login and based on your permission set. These are based on the role centers that you have been assigned to. I can actually go right in here under finance. And as I select that tile, these all can be customized also. You can see, because I went under finance here and I'm up underneath general, the vendor invoicing ledger entries, and I can see those entries. As we walk through these different types, I will come back and we will navigate back into them. When I have these ledger entries, if they are anything is in red, like here we can see an invoice, it is due to the being past due on the due date. That's all that is. It's still open. It still has the invoice in the system. So I'm actually going to go back to my role center. I'm going to go to home. If you notice here, when I bring it back to the role center, I still have this here. So as I move through different areas, it actually populates these little panels. I can go back, and it actually takes me back to the first panels. As I said, I was in finance, so I see things that have to do with finance. If I go into, I can see admin, cultivation. If I have permission sets, I can just go right into that. We are going to actually start at the top right-hand corner, and I'm going to type in just purchase. And if you notice, there's little icons over here to the left. Expand this out, and you can see where it's taking you for those different items. I want to see posted purchase receipts. I could actually go right into it. I'm actually just going to select the purchase order, and it brings me to a purchase order list. Now, whether I start at this place, I can actually go into the vendor card and go right into purchase order also. So depending on where you're sitting, depending on where you might want to go to do this. Also remember, I have my company that I'm logged into. I have my work date. If I am working on last month's, you might want to set that to the, like for instance, July 31st, because whatever the work date is, it's going to default for the document date, posting date, and so forth. And that way you don't putting in the entry all the time. But if I'm working with the prior month, July 31st, if I put that in when I go to create an entry, that's going to be the default date. I'm going to just hit cancel. All I did again was click on the actual date at the bottom left. I also can do the drop down. I can change here the work date. Also can change a company if I'm in the wrong company. So make sure you're in the correct company. I'm at the home screen. I went to purchase order, so it actually gives me the path of where I'm at. As I said, I can actually type in at the top right-hand corner, go into purchase order. If you notice, there's another purchase order down here. So it depends on what your job position is, what you work on, how you want to go into it. As I said, I can go up underneath here and I'm in your purchase order and I'm in a different area. So if you notice, it's populating it. It was under department. If I went under that area, I can actually go back a step. The little button here takes me back to where I was, or forward if I want to go somewhere. If I already went back, it takes me back to the screen I was on. I go forward, and it takes me to the screen I was on prior. It also, if you notice here, it actually defaults to where I was sitting the last time I was in that area. Again, I did the back button at top, and it takes me back to the purchase order screen here that I'm on the home screen, or I'm back and I'm underneath purchase order. Let's talk a little bit about under purchasing, different features that we can go to. And I'm actually under purchase order here on the left, and you can see my different tasks. I can go under admin. Admin takes me into features that I have set up options. But I can actually go back to the screen and I want to go to list, or I can go to tasks. If you notice, because I'm purchasing items and vendors, I can actually see their default of their listing of vendors. Or if I select items, I would see the items. I'm still under purchasing. So it's a way that I'm doing my bit, whatever I do, those functionalities in one area, and it makes it easier. Also on my list here, you can see that I'm in vendors by selecting here. We have a feature that we can turn on advanced filters. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. You see my vendor list. I can actually go in and see the balance. Anything in blue, we can drill into it. Because I'm in the vendor list, if I select this vendor, I have fax box over here to the far right, and I can see that total. So their balance is $17,607.09. If I went over here, I can actually drill in and see those entries. So if I'm not for sure if I've keyed an entry, due to this being a filter based on open, because that's their balance, all it does is it actually puts in that filter for that vendor. It's open, but if I went in and said, I want to see items that are not open also, that means they've already been paid or they've had an entry applied to them. Again, I said no. So over here, I have different columns. If you see here, my remaining balance is 0 on this. So that credit memo has already been applied to something. And that's why that is not where it has no balance. Remaining amount, I can always see the original amount, and I can also drill into it. So let's start. I'm going to actually close the screen, and let's go into purchasing again. And we're going to go into a purchase order. We can start with a purchase quote. We can actually turn that quote into a purchase order. We can actually go in here. And now I see my purchase orders. We're going to create a brand new one, but at any time we can go into the ones that are already created. You need to make sure that we keep this cleaned up. And when I say cleaned up, it will show up here on the list until everything's been received. So, and the invoice has been posted for it. So we will talk a little bit about that as we go forward also. I'm going to create a new one. NAV has the functionality, as I said, that has segregated duty. So Maybe it is that you create the purchase order and someone else in the back does the receipt of goods and someone in accounting does the invoicing. So we're going to start here. I'm going to continue talking about a little bit of navigation as we go through this to kind of help walk through, because if you've never seen any of our videos or been on the system, these are what we call fast tabs. We can collapse that and open them, but as we collapse them, if you notice, we have these fast tabs here, but it makes it where we see more, we have more room on the screen. So you can key that first area, then you can actually collapse it. Also, there's areas that we can actually customize these to be what you need. So if you don't need fields, we can actually hide them. We also have these buttons over here to the bottom of that fast tab, and it says show fewer fields. I can collapse it. So these are the fields that we normally use. We can actually promote these and make changes. I will come back to that and show you those customizations in just a little bit. If you notice over here, due to I'm on a brand new one, it's already assigned that number, even though I have not started keying. Once I selected new, it assigns a number. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to select a vendor here. So this is who we are buying the product from. We can also have at the vendor card, we can actually go in and put a default for the pay. So if we have a parent company, we pay, but we want to track who we buy it from. So I'm going to actually just select one of the vendors. As I tab off, it's going to default the data for that vendor. Be careful, because when it says buy from here, when I go to cut that check, it's going to actually do the invoicing, do the check and everything based on the vendor that we post that document with. So if I override this address, it's not going to pull that into the payment journal. So if we are supposed to cut a check separate, then I need to have different addresses or a different vendor to be able to drive that check to a different address, because this is actually based on the vendor. We can see that we have city, state. It's important as we walk through this, if you are in a Canadian company, we need to have the region in the city due to the taxing, and it actually pulls that from the vendor card, but it's important to be able to track that as we purchase things. This is, as I said, the default. We have 3 dates that are important. One is the document date. This document date is going to be based on the vendor when we receive the invoices. So we're doing the purchase order today. Maybe the vendor invoice doesn't come in for a few days. We need to come back and override this document date to whatever that invoice date is on the invoice. Due to it drives the due date. We have a posting date. If you notice, as I said about changing the date, this defaults based on today's date, but can be overridden. The posting date is very important because this is the date it hits the GL. So if I needed this entry when I go to post to hit back in July or to even further in the future, I need to be able to be open to those past months or to the future to be able to key that. The next thing is, as I said, this document date is based off the due date, and that is based off the terms for that vendor. If I go up under invoice due detail down below, this is an area that tells me what this default is for this vendor, that it's a net 10. So it took my document date, took my terms down over here, and it actually put that due date. The invoice, vendor invoice number, this is going to print on the check also to be able to let them know what invoice you're paying. The purchaser code, this is an area that we can actually just put in all your purchasers. This can be used to put filtering to make it easier to find only my POs. So it's just a way, it's a filtering, but it can also print on the PO if you're sending it to the vendor to get quotes or whatever. As I said, I'm starting at the purchase order, but if I started at the quote, I could turn the quote into the purchase order. This posting description, this description here is telling you that this purchase order number up at the top left where it says new purchase order, the P0 or PO 00000011, and what that does is it writes to the GL. So that way you can go and look for this. This is a unique number that's in now. And when I say unique number, I cannot use this number again once it is. It actually pulls the next number from the number series that is in the setup. So just remember that. But it pulls in that PO, it puts it here, but I also can actually override that posting description. So when it goes to AP Trade, it actually knows what that is. It puts it at the GL. So maybe this is an entry that I'm doing inventory. Maybe I'm paying a show deposit on something. We can actually put that in the posting description and it writes the GL. This is our order date. This date could be today's date, or it could be that you actually started this prior. Somebody might have given it to you on a piece of paper and you want to track that. We can do filters on all these dates. The main ones are document date, posting date, and then also the due date, remember, pulls from the terms, and then the order date. We can run reports and put filters by any of those dates. This is the posting description. I have it doubled here. If you notice, I have it here and I have it here. So we can make that change where it only shows up once. Number of times you printed that PO. It tracks in the background of how many times I selected print up here in the ribbon, and it just prints it and tracks it. Vendor order number. So if the vendor has like a sales order number, because he's your vendor and he would sell something to you, then you would have a sales order because you're his customer, and you might have an order number, a shipping number that you want to track. Also, we can set up those order address codes if we need to have those extra addresses. The status, if you notice it's grayed out, any field that's grayed out, I cannot make any manual changes. I have to do another function to be able to get that to change, just like the printing number. If I had a quote and I turned it into a purchase order, you would see that quote number here. Status, we're going to come back to that. The status is where it is open and we can make any changes to this purchase order as long as it's open. I'm going to actually collapse this tab, and I'm actually going over to the invoice detail tab. This is where on the vendor card also, we can have default currency. We don't want to use any currency code if it is our local currency. So I'm in a Canadian database, so I would not want to fill that in unless it was US, euros, or pesos or something like that. Then we would actually put that in. We would need to set up the currency. In the currency area, we need to put our spot rates and everything for it to do those conversions before this would work. This expected receipt date. If we put this data in here before we add our lines, it will default that on our line. So when we purchase that item, when are we expecting the item to come in? Maybe we're expecting it to come in on the 31st, or I put that there. We can have a transaction type. These are just user fields. I have not set that up, but can be. Department code and product group code. These are your global dimensions in the system. So if I was doing some purchasing for operations, or maybe it was for the manufacturer, I can set these dimensions up and it actually takes in default set up the line. The master record can automatically already pull that too if we have that information. I'm just going to put operation here and I'm going to show you how it pulls that data in. This is prepayment. So if we have prepayments, we could actually put this on each line, or we could say this whole invoice, we require a purchase to be paid, a deposit maybe, or maybe in full before they are shipped. If we put this here, this is a payment discount, but we can also down here have a prepayment percentage. So even though this is net 10 here, we could have a payment discount. If it's 2%, 10, so forth, we could actually have that percentage. Down here's that prepayment I was talking about, that if we need to have a prepayment, you actually put the percent. It can actually default from the vendor card, so it helps remind you. Maybe the payment terms are net 10, but the prepayment terms are COD. So I could come down here, which is due upon receipt, so I could create an invoice for that deposit. If I do that, it sees that payment here. As I said, this can default from the vendor card. It also can be overridden at this time. So I'm not going to put a prepayment here, but just keep in mind this can be done without any problems. It's defaulting that. The next thing, so as I said, if we had a discount, what that payment discount would be, how is it set up? Do we have to pay by a certain date to get this discount? Tax liability, it's important that being a Canadian company that, or even if it was a US company or anything, if we are tracking tax, we need to set the tax up first. We need to put it on the invoice detail before we go add items to the line. We can move these fast tabs in different orders, and that way you would have that, you fill out that, then you go to the lines tab. To be able to do that, if I do this drop down, blue arrow drop down, and I go in here and say customize this page, and I go actually to these, remember what I said, these are fast tabs. So if I go to the fast tab, I can actually move that up. So I have general, invoice detail, then line. So now when I take care of the invoice detail, it's going to populate in default based on the lines. So it closed the screen and it reopened it because I went and made changes. So now we have the general fast tab, we have the invoice detail, then we have the lines. As I said, if we fill this part out first, then before we start adding items and things, it will default on the lines below. If you do Providence tax area code, you could actually select this. So this helps with some of your expediting on different areas. So I'm going to go ahead and put this. This also, as I said, this is a tax that it tracks that. If we are tax exempt, we could put the number here. It also can be on the vendor card to be able to track that. If we are shipping or receiving out of a certain warehouse, if we put this on the invoice detail, it's going to actually populate that on each line, and it just saves time before we add our items that we put that. These other fields, what the shipping method, we can set that up. How do you ship it? These are just payment reference. If you notice, there's not a drop down, so it's just the text. Credit number, if there was a vendor had your credit number, you could actually put that. If it's on hold, it would see you inbound warehouse handling. These are just information if you need it. Request receipt date. When do I request to have this in? I want it to be here by the 31st. And they're telling me though that it will actually be here the 28th. When I put this on this invoice detail tab, it will default these dates for me also. If it has to do with the customer, so basically it allows us to drop ship a PO and actually connect it to a customer. Canadian does not use 1099 codes, but if you start using US, maybe you need that 1099 code. You set that up in the system. This is Canadian company, so I'm not going to populate that. I'm going to collapse that fast tab by just selecting that drop down. If you notice, I have my date showing, I have my terms. Also, I have the PO number here. This is that unique number in NAV. I have the vendor name, and it's at a status of open. I'm going to go to the lines tab. Remember that over here, we've got some default that's going to happen automatically on the lines. Now, your columns might not be the same because I've customized or whatever. To be able to customize these line tabs, just right click, choose columns. The ones on the left are the ones you can move over. The ones on the right are the ones that are being shown. So if you need to change these and have these in any different order, you can actually just select it, move up, move down, or so forth. If I have something over here that needs to be over here, all I do is select it, add, or I select it and remove if I don't need it. Be sure that when you get out of this screen, if you hit the X, it does not save the changes. I have to say OK at the bottom right for it to take those changes, and it will ask you to close the purchase order and reopen it to take those changes. Also, I can select the restore defaults, and that way it undoes any changes I've done. It takes it back to the standard nav defaults. I'm just going to close this. So in this area is where we're going to put what are we buying. It's important that the type that we select what it is. So if we use subsidiary ledgers, like for instance, we're buying inventory, we have to use item. We cannot use the GL. When we select item here, that number is based on that item. So I'm going to do a lookup here. And we can actually go in and see the items, and we can choose to buy any of these items. So for instance, if I'm buying, let's say I'm buying this rock wall, it actually takes that item and tells me based on the setup of that item, it's going to default a lot of these things. If I need to look at that item, I can actually go to advanced, and it brings me to a list of the items here, and I can see more detail. I can see quantity on hand. I can drill into these. I can actually go in and view it. Be careful, don't do edit, because if I accidentally make a change, I'm making changes to my inventory. Also, if I don't have permission to be able to drill into this, you will get an error message. I'm going to just tab off of this. And as I said, it starts filling in because under the invoice detail, I have my location code. I even from the location, this item, I can set default bin, so it actually pulls that in. This pulls in from the location of P1 in the bin. Also, we have things that I have asterisk we need to complete. So I'm going to just tab off. Description 2 is just an area that you can actually put any comments in. I'm going to tab off, and I'm going to order, let's say I'm going to order 50 here. This direct unit cost is actually the last cost that we bought it for. It drives it from the unit as far as the item card. It pulls that in on that unit cost of the default, but can be overridden. So what it's doing here on the line amount, excluding tax, because it has not got the tax in there yet, it takes the quantity times the amount equals the net. When you're seeing this, we're going to talk a little bit about taxes and how you can override it. So if you have something that has decimals past 4 decimal on your inventory item because it's grams or something, you would be able to override that. And I'm here and be able to, like if it was off a penny or something, you could. With this, I also can, as I said, just override, highlight, make that change. I have a slide bar here. We also have this bottom section here. If you notice, it's got the amount before taxes, and I can see the total as I'm building this purchase order to send out. I have added quantity to receive and quantity to received. That means if I order it here and I'm going to say I'm going to set 50, it's telling me that the warehouse receipt is required to be able to do that. So we turned it on that the warehouse, basically another segregated duty, another person could go do the receiver. And that's all it's doing, is warning me that I need to create a warehouse receipt that is required. But if you notice here, it's quantity to receive and quantity to invoice. So if they short ship, so if they only ship 25 to start with and then 25 later, then you would see these as we receive the goods. It will actually change this quantity here and here. Be careful before doing posting that you make sure that your quantities are correct for all lines. I'm going to bring this over here. And if you notice here, remember I set up those dimensions on the lines that I said this invoice was for operation. So I wanted that dimension to be populated. Order date, expected date, planned receipt date. You don't need to do anything with these. It defaults based on the document date and based on our defaults on the invoice detail. But this is a way we can actually do filters and be able to pull reports also. Because we have, I'm going to open this up because we show the tax liability has been selected in the tax area of where that tax is going to be. It actually automatically populated the tax liability here. Remember, if it's not set up on the invoice tab, it's not going to allow you to do it here. So what type of item it is, this is what causes it to actually know the percentage based on where it's being purchased at and what item it is. And that's going to be in another segment that I'm going to talk about sales tax. As I key off of that, it actually goes in, if you notice here, it actually taxes and shows me that Canadian dollars and shows me the tax that has been calculated based on the percentage that was set up for the tax area for this area code. Every tax group could be a different percentage, and that's why we have to select that it's liable, tax liable. We also have to set the code and where we purchasing at. With that said, I have put an item in here. I can make these columns smaller or larger if I need more data. When I have this item, it is selected. I've got it highlighted. Over to the right, we have what we call, these are fast tabs. We can drag and drop maybe it's a quote that we sent them, or maybe they sent us to verify something that they accepted our purchase order. We can drag and drop it in here and be able to open those attachments. Down at the bottom, I'm going to show you a few more fields. We have purchase invoice detail. Because I'm sitting on this line, I can actually go right into this blue. Remember, blue I can drill into. I can open the item card by just selecting that blue. It drills into that item and opens that item card up for me. When we go into something in these fax boxes, it always comes in as a view. So that's why these fields are grayed out. It actually goes back into the screen the last time I used it when I looked at. In this system here, we've got this item as a FIFO. So you notice that it is FIFO. It also, I can edit it if I need to make changes before I do that. Be aware that depending on my item card is how it's going to react when we do posting. I can come back here, go right to the vendor card, see the vendor set up, and see where it's pulling that data. I can actually go in and see other quotes, orders, and drill right into it. So now I'm sitting at the vendor card, which is the master record, and this is where it's pulling this address. Also, I am buying it from this vendor, but as I said, if there was a parent company, then I can actually do the pay to another vendor. Also, this is where it's pulling those defaults, the terms, codes, who I'm paying, and so forth. Now, later on, we're going to talk about some posting groups. Because this vendor has been tied to this vendor posting group on the master record here, it knows what AP trade account to hit on the geo when it posts. So the person making those purchase order does not make that decision. They don't make the decision how the costing goes because it's based on the item or what I put in here. I'm going to close it by just selecting X at the top. We can see other quotes, blankets. So if we've already got other orders out there, we could see it. We could actually see posted receipts. If we opened up one that's had a receipt, we could actually go and drill into it. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select a GL account. On the GL account, maybe I'm trying to find freight. If you notice, I have my default based on the filter on the name. So as I start typing, it starts finding what I'm typing. If I have my filter here based on the number, it's not finding it because it wants to know a number and not a name. To change it, all I do is switch over here. I'm going to type in freight, and it starts narrowing down. It is not a name inside that. It's what it starts with as it does the narrow. If I want this filter to be permanent here, that every time I go in and do a lookup here, that it's based on the name and not the number, I can set that at the bottom right corner of this screen. You can see it says set default for that filter. So it's already been set. If I did here and I wanted it here every time, all I do is set that default. But I do want to leave it at the name where I can find that. I am actually doing freight in, so I'm going to select it. And I don't need a location or a bin. I do need location bins for anything to do with an item, but not for a GL. The quantity has to be 1 because it will not populate and it will not pull in the freight if I do not put that. So I'm just going to put, it's $200. I'm actually just going to put a $50 here. And now if you notice here, my total excluding taxes change. If it's taxable, I need to do the tax here. What is it taxable for? I can select it, or maybe that's not taxable and it will not charge the tax now because I put non-taxable. It will show up on the reporting for our tax purposes to be able to pay it month in or quarter in or whatever you pay your taxes. So now I have an item, I have a GL account here. Just remember at this level, we have to have at least the quantity for anything we're buying. We need to have a dollar amount. I can put 0, but it's not going to track any dollar amount. So just be careful with that. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to release this. We have these fast tabs at the top. I went into it. If I'm in an edit, that's where it's allowing me to make those changes, but I could just go into a view. As long as I have not posted anything, I can delete it and start over again. Also with this is I can actually go from here. Remember how I showed you on the bottom, on the right-hand side, we have these fax boxes. I could really just drill into the vendor. I can go see other orders or whatever I need. Up here under the enhance feature, this information is a nav customization. As I said, we could drop a contract or maybe an email or anything that we want in here. We could do, maybe it's a PDF, it does Word, it does Excel. Also, with that said, if we have set enhanced fields to be filled out, that is what the enhanced field is nav. We've created a enhancement that allows you to go in and track items that are not on the field. So if there's a field that you need to report on or you need to track, we can actually set these enhancements up to be what you need, whether it's a text field, a date field. We can set those up and define what we want that used for. That's just to be able to track something that's not automatically set up. Also, if we have a workflow, that is an approval process. We could actually start that approval process here. The standard nav one is up at the top ribbon where we would send approval. It would send that out for it to get approved. It would not allow you to receive the goods or do the invoice unless it was approved. I'm going to talk about that at a later date, not at this time. If you need to know anything about work orders or these enhanced fields, let us know. We'd be glad to have a call with you and explain and walk through them and use your example and your data to be able to pull that in. So now I'm saying I am finished with this PO. We have, as I said, remember earlier I talked about it's at an open status. It does not allow us to make these changes, but if I was ready for it to move forward, so maybe the vendor, I've sent it to the vendor, I can actually select the release. I can't do that here. I have to go up here and select release in the ribbon. When I select that release, it actually goes and changes the status to the release. So when I do that, it does not allow me to make change. So if I come in here, and I'm going to collapse this for a minute, come back down here, and if I wanted to add a new GL, also, if I'm copying from the field above, the function 8 key actually copies the field right above it. So when I tab off of that, I'm going to get an error that the status must be equal to open, because as I said, when we send it to the vendor, it's been accepted. We don't want someone coming making changes, especially accidentally. All I have to do to get rid of this error, I can see the detail of what that error is. I can hit the escape button and it says, do you want to disregard this? I'm going to say yes. So with that said, I don't want to exit because I'm going to continue working on it. Be careful about these error messages that pop up. Make sure you read them before you answer them. I'm going to say no, my errors went away, and it allows me to move forward. I'm going to go back up here and we're going to talk about the other ones. If we've turned on approval process, when I go in to send that approval up at the top red where it says send approval request, it's going to put pending approval. When someone comes in and approves it that has permission to approve it, then it goes in and it will release it automatically. I am not able to select the release if I have approval process turned on. It makes me go through the approval here. It changes to pending. When whoever needs to approve it, it goes to the release status. Now, at this point in time, I am completing my PO. I can go in, as I said, I can print it. It defaults some of the settings. If you notice, when all of our print screen, it's telling you where we're at in the system, what it's going to print. It tells us the purchase order that we're in. So it automatically puts that filter in. It also, down here, I can sort it by different ways. So I can actually print more than just one at a time by putting a filter here, or I can just do one. I can preview it. Our logos and things can pull in based on the logo that's on the company information. The preview shows everything no matter what. As I said, I have my purchase order, I have my lines, and I can see my totals. I also can take this right out here. I can find something. If there was something, I have a big order, I could go find it and do next if I need it. Tax breakdowns on it also. I'm going to close this and I'm going to print this again. And I'm going to print it to here. If you see there's a drop down, if I select print, it's going to just go to the printer, but I can take it as a PDF, a Word, Excel. I'm going to print it into PDF format. If you notice, it does open up as a PDF. And now it's in a PDF format. If I had multiple pages, it would actually print all pages. As you see, there's my entry. It even shows my tax that was calculated. I'm going to close this. Now it brought me back to the purchase order I'm sitting at. And now I can close it, say, okay, I want to exit. Well, now I can see it in my list here. If it is not there, just hit refresh. It now allows us to have multiple things open at the same time. So for instance, I'm here. Remember, as I said, get in the habit of doing view to review. That way it does not overwrite things accidentally that you didn't want to happen. I also can come in here and view this one. Now I have two of them side by side that if I needed to, I could go and look at what was bought on this compared to here and say, oh, I don't need this, so I need to reopen it. So for instance, if I need to make changes, all I need to do is I released it to get it at this level, but I'm going to select reopen. It's at the top ribbon. And now it's going to allow me to make changes. All of these screens are going to go white. As I said, it's a permission set. Everything we can do in here, we can lock it down for the permissions. So now it's at the open stage. and it will allow me to make changes to this order. So maybe there was something over here I need to look at and said, oh, that is not what we ordered, or maybe it's not the correct quantity. I'm just going to shut it, close it, and come back to the other one that's open. Now, as we go through these entries, I had select no, excuse me. I'm going to come down, I'm going to collapse this again. And as I said, I can actually add more data to this and be able to make changes. But see how everything's grayed out? Because I'm in the view. This is what I was saying about to be careful with as we go through, release it. People can't make changes, but still I went into back into it. I'm going to do edit, even though it's open. I was in the view, go back here to view. It doesn't allow me to make very many changes. But if I go to edit, now it will let me type in to add more detail here. Also here, if we have the type as blank, it allows us to use these description columns just to be able to type in something. Now, let's talk about, as I put this note in here, if I print this, it's going to print this note. If I want an internal note in the system that just tells people something about it, I also can go up under notes up at the top. Over to the right, I have it as a fax box. I'm going to collapse these fax boxes. So now I actually, remember I said we could do attachment here. We can drag and drop it in. We can also go in here and just open it if there was one. We can go back and we can add one also. But if I come down here, I have notes here. So if I want it on the side, so when I open it, I see those notes. This note here is the same thing whether I'm here. So if I added a note here, I'm just going to do test. This is actually where I can notify someone in the system and it will look up our user. I'm just going to save that. It actually tracks the date, who was logged in, the date, and what that note is. Now, I'm seeing it from here, but if I go up at notes up here, so if I want to remove this from my fax box, I could, but I can still see that entry. I also can view it. I can create a new one or I can delete it. So if I viewed it, now it's in here, and maybe I made a mistake and I need to make that change, then I want to come in here or I can come over here. I'm going to do delete, remove, or view it. As I said, review takes me into it's grayed out, but I want to make another one. All I do is select this, do new, type my note, and I save it. Now I have two different ones and it date and timestamps it. But the vendor doesn't see these notes. These are internally. So let's go back over to the line level where I typed in the description. This is, as I said, it's just a note. I can also right click here and insert a line, having this to be blank, and create another description below that item. As I said, this print, all I did was right click and I said new line and it inserted it above it. Now, if I want to remove something, all I do is right click and I delete that line. Now it's gone. Again, items, we have to select the item GL, we select the posting GL account. I'm going to release this. That way we can do the next step and go in and do the receipt of goods. So I have my item here. Two things we can do. We can actually go ahead and assign this item if it is lot tracking. We can actually assign it here, or we can have the receiver, when they go in and receive it in the back, have them put the lot number. So the next step, because it's released, it has to be at the release status before it allows me to create a warehouse receipt. Warehouses can be, receipt can be created at the back and on another, someone else is doing that step. Or I can actually go ahead and create that warehouse receipt and actually print it to the back based on my printer when I go to print. So we have these fast tabs. I'm actually going to go under action and I'm going to create that warehouse receipt. What this does, it tells me it's been created. It's actually going to be created with that first item. It opens it up. If I have permission, it's going to open it up. And I can go and print this to the back if I want to let them know this product's coming in, so they can actually go into the system and look it up, or they can actually just print it. Then they can actually use barcodes or so forth. We're not going to talk about that today, the barcoding or printing and labels and things, but just keep in mind that it can be done. On my purchase order, it's telling me it was a purchase order, where that purchase order is coming from in that line. So now let's say this is the quantity order, this is the quantity receipt. Remember I said we can short, maybe they back ordered, or I can short receive it because only 25 was received. Now, let's talk about the next step. The next step is, because this is a lot-driven item, we need to put that lot number. If I go up underneath lines here, I can actually go to item tracking. If you notice this, the value at this is not set up for item tracking. So it's going to not need it. But as I said, if I needed it, I would go to item tracking. I can also say I forgot an item. I don't have everything here that I need to. I can actually delete this warehouse document. I'm back at the PO and I can make my modifications. Remember, I'm at release. I'm going to say open. It allows me to come in and put the next item in. I can go in and I'm actually going to just put in, say I'm going to receive some dry flour, maybe for whatever reason we had to go pick some up. If I resort these by selecting these in columns, be careful because it is totally resorting them. Remember my description that was up higher, now it's below it. So be careful with that. But I can actually resort this based on the type, based on any column that's in here. So I want to come in here. We have another item. So it actually, that item defaults to go to the vault, not the receiving bin. That's up to you what you do here. I'm going to actually order 50 grams of this. It defaults the last time that what I bought it for. And it has my amounts. Remember our sales tax. You might want to move these columns up closer that you don't forget them to be able to put those in. That item defaulted the cannabis, and so my tax is correct. I'm going to release it again. Now I have 2 items here in a GL. GL we don't need to receive, so it's only going to have the receiver for these 2 items. So now it's released. I'm going to create another warehouse receipt. As I said, I can print this in the back. That way they know what's coming in and what to expect. At this time, I can close it, just say okay after I print it. Remember, when we print, all the printing screens are the same. I can preview it. I can take it to a PDF, Word, Excel. What do I need, or do I need to take it to a printer? At this time, I'm not going to receive the goods because maybe the person in the back is going to receive them. So I'm just going to say okay. And I'm created the receiver. So the next thing I'm doing, so remember we hit create warehouse receipt. Now I'm going to go under navigate and I want to go see those receipt lines because I've already created it. So I don't want to create another one. All I want to do is go in here and these fast tabs, as I said, we just select on them. I'm actually going to go to receipt lines. Now I can see those items. As I said, it's just inventory items, but I'm going to navigate into it. I want to see the warehouse document again. These are the lines. This is the document. So I'm just going to select it, and it's going to open that document. As I said, it's only inventory items, not GL items. With that said, we have to receive the GL2 at the time of invoicing if we haven't done it in the back. So here's this. This item is not item tracking. I could under lines, and I go to item tracking. As I said, it told us it's not. I'm going to go to the second line, and I'm going to do item tracking up underneath lines. Over to the left, I'm going to select it. Now it's going to open up my lot tracking. As you see, I have this lot. This is for this item. I'm ordering 50. Well, if we're not doing 50, if they didn't ship it, then we don't want to actually do the lot number for 50. So I can change this. I want the quantity to be 25. It's going to receive 25 until in lieu of 50. Just remember, before I go do the lot, 2 things to make sure. I want to make sure my location is correct. It tells it at the top. I want to make sure my bins are correct and my quantity that I'm receiving in. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to go to lines, item tracking, and I'm going to put a lot number. I can have the system default it, or I can just type it in what that is. And now I tell it for this lot, how many quantity is this going to be based on? I'm going to go ahead and receive all of it. Say okay. Now I'm still in the receipt. The PO's over here in the background, but the receiver is where I go in and receive it. Whether I have warehouse people or not, you have to do the receiver if it's turned on in the payable setup. So I'm going to say I have that. I can also automatically default the quantity to receive. I have it turned on to defaulted. That is another turn on feature in Nav, and I'll go to that, and that's under the payables. And the ones that have the gears are set up. So let's go back over here. I'm going to actually go to the payable setup. And it actually is purchase payable setup. I'm going to select this. This is an admin feature, but just to let you know where some of this data is coming from. I can have the defaulted based on the day that I'm sitting here. Remember, we can change that by selecting the bottom left date. I can also default the remaining of what's used on those lines when I go to do that receiver. The number series pulls in based on the numbers of what we're doing. I'm actually doing a purchase order. So when I went into the orders, it's using this number series, and it knows the next number to use. I'm going to close it. If I go back down here on the bottom, I can see windows that are open. Be careful, as I said, it's easy to open them in 1 or 2 screens at the same time. I'm going to go back to the warehouse receipt, and I'm going to post it. I have my quantity on hand. I have my tracking number for this item. It's been set up. After everything's been completed, I actually can go print the receipt. I can post and print, but I can print ahead of time and then come back and just post. It's up to you. I'm going to just select the post receipt. I am not posting the invoice. This is just the items. Select yes. It tells me that 1 out of 1 has been processed. I'm going to go back to this window that I was sitting in. I'm going to go in and do a view. So now it went from receive to quantity received that you've already posted it. I also, because I'm sitting at the PO, I'm in navigation. I can go look if there was any receivers done and look at that and verify that it was done. I'm going to navigate to it. So this is a way we can drill into it. This is all driven based on permission set. So if you don't have permission, you would not be able to do that. This is the GL. I select it and it shows me the entries that are taking place for both of those items and that it is hitting the GL based on those setups. I'm going to close it. I can print it. I can navigate. When I navigate, the same thing, I could go in and see that. I can see the statistics. So the receiving's done, but let's say when I receive the invoice in, now I can go back over here and navigate and drill into that receiver because I'm in accounting. For instance, I'm in accounting and I need to see all the receivers. So I would see the receivers that were done. Also, if they've already done any invoicing or prepayment, we could actually drill into that and see those documents that needed to. So remember I said we've received the goods, but we have not for the GL. So we need to make sure that when we post that we actually have to post this item, make sure there's a quantity or we'll not post anything. I'm going to actually go back up to the home screen. And what if I got something in that I've got a rounding issue based on this tax? They charge us a little bit more. So what I can do at the top, we have a statistic. Down here, we can see what the total invoice is for. If they send it, it should be for $854 because we have our product, we have our sales tax, and we have our total. If I go into the statistic area, this is a way that I can make those overrides. So if the rounding was incorrect, I could actually make those changes. As I said, also, this is a permission issue that if it's grayed out, I'm not able to do it. But if I'm in edit mode, I should be able to make a change here. So it is a permission to go in to see these totals, but I would see the total, what the amount expecting for cash. If you see here what the items are, my total tax that's being done in the total. So if I was off here and I wanted to change that to a 5, if you notice, or 6, I can't make a change here because it's grayed out, because either I don't have permission sets, or when I selected that and I'm sitting on this item, but it's still, when I go into it, I'm navigating down to the receipts. That means that it's receipts that have been posted, not ones that have not. So I can see here that it's posted. But I can go in here and go back to statistics. It's grayed out. I can go in here, reopen it. Now I can go make changes. Here, as I said, there's my invoicing, my totals, my breakdowns, shipping information. I can see if we had weights on the item and everything, I would see what that is. If it was a prepayment, I would see that, and also see the vendor's balance. I also, that tax is European, so you won't need it. So you don't have to worry about that. So, as I said, I'm in the here. And it is not, I need to check my permission sets. I will get back to y'all on that and show y'all on a credit memo on the next recording, also how to make changes, because it should allow me to go in and make that changes here. Oh, I'm in a view, maybe that's it. Let's go in statistics here. And it's still coming in as gray. So I need to see what's causing that and get back with you on it. So now, if I'm not ready, I can post it. If I have permission sets, I can. If not, I can close it. I'm going to exit it. Now I have my PO and I'm finished with it. So again, when I'm in my list, I can see where I'm sitting here. I'm just seeing my open POs. We need to keep this all cleaned up. I've got my action items. So if I was sitting on here and hit reopen, it's going to change that status here to be reopened. I can do a test report. Remember, before we do any posting, to get familiar with how to use it and make sure everything's right. Let's go ahead and do the test report. We're just going to preview it. It brings it up. I can print it if I want. It even tells me who was logged in, what the filters are when I do my reports. Breaks down my tax here. If there was any tax, and allows me to set that up. So I'm going to actually go back to that purchase setup. And that's where the gears, and this is purchase payable setup. There is some settings in here that we need to make sure. Remember, these are the number series. I did purchase order, so it knows what number series to use to create that new number. Every time we go in the system and make an entry, it knows what number series to use to create the next number. These are just some settings that need to be set here. This is allow tax difference needs to be set if we allow that. Also, these are just setups and reminders as far as how it responds when we first do something, but it allows us to go in and make changes if our permission sets allows it also. Receipt on invoice, that means it will allow me to create a receipt of goods, but it also will let me do the receipt when I do the invoice and post the invoice and the receiving at the same time. Be careful with that because I could accidentally receive things I didn't mean to. I'm going to say just okay or close, depending on whatever, and it closes that entry. So the next thing we want to do is I can do a preview posting. A preview posting actually, and I'm selected this line, so the preview posting is going to be for this order. I can go up under here. I can also go up underneath the navigation. Remember to see the receipts, the other invoices. If we've done some prepayments, I could see it. I can go to the lines. If we haven't received all the goods, I could actually go into that. I can print these. Remember that on the home tab, I had the release or reopen, but I also have it on this tab too. And I can post. Let's go talk about the preview posting. Basically, it's giving me an error. As I said, remember to watch your errors. It's telling me my vendor invoice number is not there. We have to have that vendor invoice number. That's what prints on the check to know that what invoice we're paying. I'm just going to put test, and I'm going to put in, this needs to be a unique number. So if we have back orders and they've got one invoice, and you do multiple, just make sure you do a unique number, Steve, for change or whatever this needs to be. I'm just going to put test in my initials here. Now it should allow me to do my preview posting. What preview posting does is it tells us what's going to happen when we do posting, but before the posting is done. So we can literally see every entry. It's going to hit the GL. We've got 2 items plus a GL entry plus AP. So it's going to actually show us, we can drill in here. We can show the related entries. I'm actually going to go into this 14. I see the entries that are going to take place when I do posting. Remember, I already posted the receipt of goods. Over here, the document number has asterisks because technically it hasn't posted, so it's just letting you know this is a preview. You can tell when we actually do the posting and we do the same functionality and drill in, we would have the document number of what it's posted. My AP trade account, what it's being used. It's actually doing AP trade. It's doing my sales tax. Here's my lines where I did the freight. I did that item, so it's going to affect raw materials. Both of those items were assigned to a posting group, so it knows what entry to hit in the background. Also, if it has to do with the vendor ledger entry, I see just the vendor, what's being hit. So I can see here, it's going to have an invoice. It's going to have the total that is due to the vendor. As I said, this one too has asterisk as the document number. So it's just telling me, showing me what's going to happen when I post. Because we have tax entries, it actually shows me my tax entries that are being charged on this. And I could see those on the report too, of those different entries. It creates that liability on the balance sheet. The detail would be on the line level, and then the value entry, or because it has two inventory items, we could even see the value entry, what it's going to hit when it hits that item card of the quantity on hand and so forth. We can see the cost of it. You can see these are item numbers. This post to the posting group to know how to react as far as what the AP trade is and so forth. I can actually print this at any time. I can go look and find some or put notes on it. I'm just going to close it and I'm going to post this invoice. Now, before I do this, receiver went through the warehouse. The invoice is going to be done by the accounting people. This scenario, we need to do receipt and invoice. If we don't, and I'm going to collapse this for a minute, because I have a GL that has not been received, I can do this in 2 stages if I want. So when I do the post, I can just do the receiver and it's only going to post that receiving of that line. Or I can do receive and invoice and it's going to actually do the invoicing. So now all of it's received. So I'm going to come back here and all I need to do is the invoicing and it's going to clean up my invoice. Now watch what happens. I'm going to move this down a little bit. So when I post this entry, it's because everything's going to have 100%. Remember, just because I order it doesn't mean that it's invoicing. This right here is what's going to drive what's being invoiced on here. So when I post it, if this here is not correct, I'm going to post the incorrect amount. So be careful with that. I'm going to now post. I'm going to do the invoicing. It's going to move this to the archive. I can actually open from here the posted document and see it. But now 11 is not in the list because I posted everything on it. It removed it from the list. I can also go back to this screen. We can actually go pull reports. We can print things from here after the fact if we need to. Now, I actually moving my mouse over here. There's the warehouse receipt. I'm going to close it because these, as I said, these are things that be careful. We leave things open. We need to close them. I can just close it here. Be careful with that because I'm sitting on here and it's going to close my nav down. But I can actually go into posted documents. If you notice my screen, I'm going to move this a little bit larger over here. I can actually go to posted documents and see the purchase receipt. These are things that have been posted, so I see that list. I also can go to the purchase invoice from here or from the vendor. So now there's that, the one I just received and just posted. If you noticed here, this is the vendor, this is the total amount. I can actually open that entry. I can navigate and go back to the original document of that posted purchase invoice that was posted for there. So I'm going to open that up. And now I have my entries. I can review it. I also in the GL, because it's posted, now that it's posted, when I go see the GL, I'm going to see the document number completed. Also, I can see who posted it and where did it come from. What source did it come from? It was in purchasing. These are inventory, and I can see all the entries for this transaction. I'm going to close it. Same thing, but as I said, it's got a document number. One thing that NAV allows us to do, we can actually correct. So I can create a credit memo. Be careful using this function, whether I go into navigate or I double click and open this up. If I do credit correction, it is actually going to do a credit memo. It reverses it, it ties it to this, and it creates a new purchase invoice to be able to make those changes. Please do not do this in the live database until you understand this functionality and make sure that you understand what you want. We are not going to do that in here on this call. The next taping I will do is based on credit memos and so forth. But right now I'm going to leave this as is. I'm going to close it. So now let's walk back through the steps. I'm actually going to go back to department and I'm going to go into purchasing. Over here under archives, whether I type it in up here to find it or it's over here to the left, is when I finish that purchase order, it moves it to the archive list that it's been done, completed. If you notice, I have 3 different ones here because I did 3 different times I went and did posting and did entries. It tracks those changes because we have it turned on in the payable setup to turn that on. I'm going to go back to the payables. I can select back or I can just select the purchase here. I want to go to the task or I can go back and go back to the list. So it went from purchasing. So I created purchase order, then it moved it to the archive area and actually went to the posted documents. I'm going to go back to payables. I'm going to actually go into order processing so we see these other areas of the system. When we're sitting here, if I have a purchase invoice and never did a purchase order, I'm able to go in there and create a purchase invoice. A purchase invoice, I'm going to do new. It is very similar to the purchase order, but the only thing is I don't, usually when I'm doing purchase invoicing, I am not doing an inventory item, or I'm doing the purchase invoice on a PO that's already got the item received, but not invoiced. Here, I can select a vendor. I'm just going to select this one. I'm going to go in. It puts my defaults, just like what we did on the PO. I'm going to actually leave the dates the same. Remember the posting comments. I'm going to say this one is a test, a PI, and I did this entry. Whether this is the vendor's invoice number, this is what's going to show on the check. So be careful what you make sure this is correct before you do any posting. Remember, I can put the purchaser. I can actually, some of these screens, some of these areas we might need or maybe not. I'm going to show fewer. I'm going to remember we want to create our purchase detail line before we do our line so it populates it. I'm going to say this invoice has to do with finance. It's just maybe the utilities and we don't want it to go to operation, or maybe it is the operation or something we're doing an invoice for marketing. We would just select it and it actually follows forward. Same thing with the liability, tax liability. If it is taxable, it has to be filled out here before you do your line. Now, I'm going to go over here and under type, I still see whether it's a GL item, fixed asset, and charge. Charge would be like I'm adding a freight after the fact, and I can actually add that back to a receiver of that. I'm just going to do GL. And I'm going to say this is just utilities. So we're just creating the invoice for this vendor for utilities because it has nothing to do with the item. I do not need location. I do need at least a quantity of one. I don't need the unit of measure. And then maybe I'm actually, it was $500. If I need another line, I can go and create another line. So maybe this one, I'm doing 2. And if you notice, it is increasing as I start putting in here. So maybe the first one had that dimension was for the finance, or maybe the first one here, this one here is for operation, and this one's for finance. I'm actually charging them to that dimension code for those individual items. At this point in time, I know it's correct. If it's taxable, as I said, I need to make sure that my tax group is on here. If not, I'm going to get an error message also because it's been turned on. So I'm just going in tax group and I'm going to use this and say it's non-taxable. If it's one's taxable and one's not, it's still going to tax it and be able to calculate it. So I'm actually going to put taxes on one item and not the other. And you will be able to see that tax what it is. Now, let's talk about this. If I'm off, it does not allow me, if you notice here, I can't make any change. I'm keying, but it doesn't let me make change here. It also, this is the amount, excluding tax, and we can actually right click and show columns and show the total also. I'm in here, up at the top, that statistic. If I'm off, if my tax is off, remember it did not allow me to do that PO, but it does let me do it at the purchase invoice level. I can go here and I can make changes. So if it's off a penny or something, I can actually come in and make that change here. And that way the tax is affected when I make that change here. It's actually giving me an error. I need to go back and see what's happened. I'm going to hit the refresh button. I'll come back and we'll talk about that on the taxes training because it should allow us to make changes. I need to go check my settings and get back with y'all on that, on the, to allow that settings to make that change. Refresh it, say okay. It actually did make it. So I did have an error, but it did allow me to make that change. I'm overriding it. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to tab off that change up here until I tab off. It updates this. It actually is just, it looks like it is working. I will find out what's going on with this error message that's happened, but it did allow me to make the changes. I'm going to refresh. Now this is changed, and now this is going to change and it updates my tab. So I can post this. It's ready to post. I can print and post, or I can just post. We have an action tab here. We can put comments. We can put comments on the line. Remember our comments that we did insert. This was a blank, and we just typed in, maybe it's just for us. If you notice, I can use, it's alphanumeric, and it allows us to have 50 characters. That's all it is a comment. If I collapse these tabs, then I would see my items better. I wouldn't have anything else but that description. It is at an open status. If we have turned on approval, I have to send out for approval. I can see all the approvals that's taken place. We do not have that turned on here. I'm just going to post. As I said, I can post and print. I'm going to select post here. I'm going to say post invoice, yes. It's going to go in. I can open that posted document and see that it has been posted. Now my document's been posted. I can actually, from this screen here, I can actually go see the statistics. So you can see the difference in those taxes. It did change the tax here. I can see the amounts. Also, I can remember I said I can navigate back into the document or see the GL side of it also. I can drill in if I had an attachment and see those attachments. Also, here's my vendor. I can go in here and drill in and go to the vendor card if I need to. I'm going to close it. So today we went through how to do a purchase order, how to do a purchase invoice, and be able to create those. There is another step. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to go back to purchase order. So as I said, we can have someone in the warehouse that does the receiver. So we have a purchaser does the order. We have someone else that receives the goods in. We have someone else that does the invoicing. I'm going to show you how to walk through and do the invoicing side. That if I have a vendor that invoices me for multiple POs, but on one invoice, I don't want to go into the PO. But if I'm doing just the invoice, they've already done the receiving, and I just want to do invoicing, I can actually come in here, do the invoicing. Remember, make sure our posting date hits the GL, it's correct. Our document date's what the due date is based on. I go in, I put in my purchase invoice number, and I can post it from here. If I'm in accounting, as I said, I can actually do another step, which is actually, I'm going to go up to here, and I'm going to do a purchase invoice. I'm going to do a new. I'm going to select, I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to come back here and see the purchase order list. So think about this. We had the purchase order created. We did the receipt of goods, but we haven't done the receipt of invoice. So I'm going to actually, I can come in here. If I had another PO here, I can actually go in and put it from the invoicing. So this was vendor 3. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to fill out all the necessary areas, posting. This is the purchase invoice. So here, I'm at purchase invoice. Down here under function, I can go get receipts for this vendor. So if they had 2 different POs done and the receipts were done, but I have one invoice, I always want to start from that at the purchase invoice area. So I can go see the receipts that have been done and link those in here. So now I even see my purchase order, my purchase receipt number that was posted. I would go do another one and pull those in. What's going to happen, because I'm in the purchase invoice, when I post this, I'm just going to post it. It's actually going to go to that PO, and it's going to write that I've done the invoicing for it. Back here, I'm going to refresh the screen, and that PO is still open. Even though I've received everything, I'm going to go in and view it. So now we have the quantity received and quantity invoice, but it's still in my purchase order, even though 100% of it's completed. So at month end, what we usually do, or this can be done, it's usually done by accounting. They can go in and clear out those. So if I go into delete, help if I could spell today, and I'm going to go in, and I'm not going to technically delete it. I'm just going to apply those deleted in those purchase invoices, and I'm going to remove this from the list. So at month end, I can actually come in here. 2 ways to do it. I can delete or cancel those, and I'm doing purchasing, so make sure you're going into the purchase area that I'm doing. So I'm going to do, see how it narrows down my list. I can't technically delete anything that's out there. So if I tried, I don't want to delete any posted entries anyway, but I just want to archive that because it's 100% here. I can actually do it from here. I can do an edit. I can actually archive this. If I go up underneath here, remember 100% everything needs to be received. This one is not, because this one is, it's got received invoice, so it's 100% completed. I can do two things. If I go over here under action, I can automatically archive that, and it will take it out of my list. Make sure everything on this item has been received in invoice. So this is definitely a permission issue that you need to make sure that people, not everybody have access to this to be able to allow to do it, but I can archive it. It's going to remove it from my list. As I said, I can also, I'm going to exit this. I also can do the purchase orders. Remember, as I type, I'm able to see this list. I can see things that are happening, but I can actually delete and it's actually going to go in here. This is the deleted one, and this is the print. Now, because I had here, I went in here. This tells me whether it's under reports, what it's under, where I'm seeing this. So now, if I did a receipt, and I want to see the different receipts, all I'm doing is typing here, and it's finding that. Here's my purchase receipts down here, and I know that it's in the warehouse area, but it also is under the PO area that's here. These little screens here, these little icons tell me where I'm going in to be able to do that. So again, at month end, we want to keep this cleaned up and take care of this. So now I'm going to come back here. If I type this incorrect, it's not going to find it. It narrows down as I start finding it. So auto clear entries. This is an enablement that we have here that if I'm clearing entries, I would actually see that. So there's different areas depending on what you want to do or where you want to take that entry of how to work that. So we covered purchase orders, we covered purchase invoices, and we also have covered purchase receipts in here. As I said, if I go to this list under purchase orders, down at the bottom, I can reprint. These are documents that I've already printed, or I can print them. This is a purchase invoice. It opens the screen. I put a filter in. I can preview it or print at any time. Hope this helps you. I'm going to talk a little bit in another session on how to do purchase credit memos, how to do cleanup, how to attach purchase orders to a invoice that's where the invoice is being created, the credit memo is being created, and I'm going to show you how to apply those and do cleanup. Also, we're in here in vendors. I showed you this at the beginning, how we can go in and find that vendor. We did an entry on this vendor. If I drill into it here, I'm opening the vendor card. I can go into their balances, and I can see those entries that I've created, the purchase invoice. I can see who posted this entry. If your columns are different than mine, all you need to do, remember, is right click, choose columns, make your changes. I want to see who posted this and what source. That means where did they post it from, what area in the system. We have to close it. I'm just going to close out of it. I'm actually going to go back into that. So over here we see if it's an invoice. I'm going to move my slide bar and I can see who posted it and we posted it in purchasing. There's my entry number. I can drill into it and show the posted document at any time. I can go see that now we're back into that posted invoice that was created. I can see the receipt. I also can navigate down into it, see the statistics. If I go over here, remember, as I said, we're showing how to do credits and reverse at a later time. I can print this document. I can navigate into the purchase receipt, the purchase invoice, and see entries from there. Hope this helps everyone. Let us know if we need to schedule an appointment to talk about individual needs, whether it's a purchase order, purchase invoice. And as I said, I will start creating a purchase credit memo and another recording for that. Thank you for your time today and hope this helps everybody.